The year is 1983. The place, Kansas City, Missouri, in the heart of the USA. Every talking head on the radio and television is gabbing about increased tensions in Europe. The Soviets are building up troops and armor on the West German border. Everyone in the Kansas City area is used to war fears, but things are heating up at an alarming rate, and the missile silos surrounding the city are starting to resemble bullseyes more than effective deterrents. It's been a danger to cities like this one for decades already, but now all of the Air Force personnel have been put on alert status. The Soviets are rolling tanks through the Fulda Gap and have begun marching into Central Europe. Could this be it? All it would take is one detonation on the other side of the ocean to put this whole city, this whole countryside, this whole nation in danger of nuclear annihilation. The news over the radio spells it all out. NATO dropped 3 airburst tactical nukes in order to halt the Soviet advance, and not long after that, the silos open up, and the Minuteman missiles paint the Missouri sky with contrails. In this video, I'm going to go for something a little different. I'd like to talk about a film, specifically a made-for-TV movie from 1983 called The Day After. This movie was made during the height of an event that would later be known as the War Scare, a subject that I will be diving deep into in my next mini-doc. It was a time when US and Soviet diplomacy had reached a fever pitch. The increasing vitriol of the Reagan administration's rhetoric, the aggression and paranoia coming from Russia, and harrowing events like the destruction of Korean Airlines Flight 007 all threatened to push both sides over the nuclear brink. The Day After would show the people of America the absolute stakes of the burgeoning conflict, starkly portraying the horror and dismal futility of thermonuclear war, all on network television. The idea for The Day After was born amongst ABC higher-ups after the success of the nuclear disaster thriller The China Syndrome.
The China Syndrome, the China Syndrome, the China Syndrome.
Which was concerned specifically with power plant meltdowns. The script was trusted to writer Edward Hume, who took the task extremely seriously, delivering a script that expertly walked the tightrope between realism and the TV friendliness that would be required by ABC. Nicholas Meyer, fresh off the success of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, would be slated to direct, and like Hume, Meyer recognized the gravity of the project and dove deeply into the history and speculation surrounding nuclear war, bound and determined to produce a realistic, uncensored depiction of the end of the world. Meyer did not want the depth of the subject matter to be overshadowed by big stars, and the only big name for the day on the cast would be Jason Robards, who had starred in the epic spaghetti western masterpiece Once Upon a Time in the West, among other things. The other roles would be taken by lesser-known actors for the time, but 2 of the names that would end up being big were Steve Guttenberg, later of Police Academy fame, and John Lithgow. These actors would be responsible for possibly the most effective part of this presentation, the human element. The filmmakers knew they would need to portray terrific destruction, but that portrayal would be meaningless without an effective human drama to contrast with. The film begins with an idyllic view of the countryside around Kansas City, juxtaposed with an at times dissonant rendition of the 18th century hymn, How Firm a Foundation. These reels are almost exploitative in their depiction of rural America, and knowing what is coming next adds a sting of foreboding to the montage. The story goes on to follow a smattering of characters in and around the Kansas City area, including a military couple, a doctor and his wife and children, students and faculty at a university, and 2 rural families. We spend the entire first hour of the movie learning who these people are and experiencing the mundanities of their lives. One family is preparing for a wedding for their young daughter, another is experiencing the pain of an empty nest, and still another is just a young family enjoying the day-to-day of American life. But through all of this normality is the increasing specter of tension in Europe. Characters hear about real strategic points like the Fulda Gap,
by rapid Soviet tank and artillery advances into the Fulda Gap,
and Soviet troop movements and buildup that really happened at different points in history. Only this time, the temperature never goes down. The footage and treatment of SAC in the US military is extremely accurate, with every detail possible being included in the buildup. You see crewmen aboard the EC-135 Looking Glass going over the Commanders-in-Chief's schedules for the day, SAC crews scrambling to the tarmac, and missileers communicating release procedure and executing the final launch. The characters discuss real equipment like Minuteman missiles and real locations like the Fulda Gap. If you've watched my videos thus far, you'll probably recognize more than a couple things I've gone over in the past. After a literal hour of buildup, the moment finally arrives. Missile silos light up, and the missiles scream toward Russia, and everyone knows that a Russian response is guaranteed and imminent. Our characters are scattered around the city, some in basements, others attempting to hide amongst traffic jams and riotous crowds, all to the haunting tune of screams and air raid sirens. This buildup is one of the most frightening and intense sequences I've seen put to film. I experienced actual sweating nausea as the inevitable inched forward. Like the characters in the movie, you know it's coming, and there's nothing that you can do to stop it. First comes a high-altitude blast causing an EMP. And then it happens. Half of the characters we've walked with up to this point are killed instantly, and the ensuing detonation scene is a portrait of destruction and death that at once shows its age, but loses none of its potency thanks to the meticulous work the writers put in to make you connect with the people that are suffering. And that's when the namesake of the film begins, the day after. The second half is concerned with the desperate fight for survival of those left alive. Depictions of radiation poisoning, the decay of society, and the terrible dread of knowing everything is gone and nothing will ever be the same. This portion of the film, while well done and well acted, is a bit more of a slog than the first half, but that almost seems intentional. The scenes in the second half make you feel uncomfortable and anxious. This isn't like a normal movie where you know everything's going to work out in the end. You know it won't. And all the rest of the movie is like a reveling in depression and hopelessness. Our young bride goes mad with grief, our stalwart doctor faces the futility of endless victims, and our wayward airman navigates the broken world in search of his wife. The film ends with a disclaimer, reminding the viewer that the preceding pictures were fictitious, and that the real thing would likely be much, much worse. I personally found The Day After to be a moving and terrifying film to watch, especially after making all the videos I have. This film depicts the exact thing that fascinates us with nuclear history: the end of society, the end of the world, and the end of life as we know it. It's not perfect by any stretch. Some of the acting is a bit clunky and overly expositional, and indeed the effects are dated. And I think the immediate reversion to a Mad Max-style dystopia happens jarringly fast, but then again, who can say how fast that might happen in these unprecedented circumstances? But the depictions of the aftermath do one thing extremely well. It makes it all ugly. There is no movie magic or polishing. It's a bleak, depressing holocaust, and you can feel it, almost like radiation penetrating your body. And I'm not the only one who thought so. The Day After was viewed by an estimated 100 million Americans on its premiere, and it was discussed on air immediately afterward by big names like Henry Kissinger and Carl Sagan. The subject matter was thought to be so shocking that ABC even set up 1-800 hotlines for counseling. Reagan's White House even requested an early viewing of the film, and Reagan himself called the movie very effective and said it left me greatly depressed. It is even thought that the viewing helped reorient the president's views on nuclear brinksmanship, helping pave the way to better diplomacy with the USSR in the latter half of the 80s. That's quite the accolade if you ask me. There were disparaging opinions by those that felt the movie was too bleak or unpatriotic, and even Ben Stein, the Bueller guy, thought it was too harsh on mutually assured destruction, an opinion that many shared. I suppose some folks feared it might make people so afraid of nuclear war that the US would have to get rid of their bombs, I guess.
I don't understand.
I certainly agree that there is a strong argument to be made for the importance of mutually assured destruction, but I also think it's silly to imagine that learning about the horror of war would make us more likely to engage in it. The dance of death that we've all been a part of for nearly 80 years is a complicated one, and it's hard to say what has kept us from falling out of step this whole time. Perhaps it's futile to consider a world without nukes, but perhaps acceptance of that futility is a pill too bitter to swallow. In the end, I think that The Day After is an immensely important movie for its time, and it has lost very little of its weight over the years. It strikes me as one of those films that everyone ought to see at least once. Anyone who has perhaps forgotten about what we have to fear in a nuclear world should put it on and allow the dread and horror to wash over you. Because all of this horror is still possible today, and if our leaders continue to be laissez-faire with their saber-rattling threats, we might be closer to a day after than we ever were in 1983. This slightly dated vision of apocalypse might serve to make us try a little harder to stave off hell in whatever way we can. Perhaps the most powerful moment in the film for me is the scene in which Denise, our young bride, comes shaking down the stairs, clutching her wedding dress in one hand and a stuffed animal in the other. The whole first half of the movie, she's been trying so hard to be a grown-up, sneaking out with her fiancé against her father's wishes, resenting the childish games of her little sister, and anxiously anticipating her wedding day. But in this moment, as the missiles are flying to and fro, she regresses to a childlike state, crying as she holds on to her impossible future in one hand and her dissolving past in the other. For Denise, the day after was supposed to be the greatest day of her life, but the hydrogen bomb doesn't care that she wants to get married. Alright everyone, thanks so much for watching this very different offering from me. There's a lot more that could be said about this movie, and I'd love to do a deeper dive into the historical significance and accuracy, especially as it relates to my other video subjects. I hope this brief look at The Day After encourages you to check it out, despite the bleak subject matter. As of time of recording, it doesn't seem to be available on any major streaming platforms, but you can find some terribly expensive Blu-rays and DVDs on Amazon. I got my copy from the fabulous Kino Lorber, but it seems it is out of stock for the moment, so hopefully they'll print more soon.
Nothing.
Also, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm pretty sure you can get it for free on YouTube, but don't quote me on that.
Wait, that's illegal.
Have any of you out there seen it already? If so, tell me what you thought of it in the comments, and if you haven't seen it, I hope you can track it down and tell me your thoughts below. Maybe I'll do a follow-up deep dive if interest allows. I hope to make Doom to Rewind a continuing series, focusing mainly on historic and important films that relate to subjects I've discussed or plan to discuss, but who knows, I might just talk about movies I think are meaningful to me for whatever reason. Don't worry, I'll be making more historical mini-docs soon, but I wanted to put this out there now and see what y'all think. Leave a like and a comment if you don't mind, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't yet. See you in the next one.